nor that is not the lark whose notes do beat, the vaulting heavens so high above our heads. I have more care to stay than will to go. Come, death, and welcome—
No! You must not say such things, or I shall cry.
Well, then let us stop and read no further until tomorrow. We shall let Romeo live. This charming spot seems acutely made. It seems to me to cradle the words of the divine will.
The verses are divine, and the soft air here is a divine accompaniment. And see these green shades from the sharp personae. What makes them divine to me is the way you read.
Flatterer.
Poor lovers, their fate is cruel. I think
What?
nothing.
Something that made you blush red as a rose?
Nothing, I say.
Oh, that's too transparent. I see it all. You are thinking of our fathers,
Perhaps.
and of their terrible hatred for each other.
The thought often pains me. It makes me cry when I'm alone. Last month, when I came home from the covens, my father pointed out your father's park and said to me, "My dear child, behold the domain of my mortal enemy, Bergman. Never cross paths of those two rascals, Bergman and his son Percival. Mark well my words and obey me to the letter, or shall cast you off as an enemy. The family has always been a bitter enemy with their own." I promised. But you see how I keep my word?
Did I not promise my father to do the same? Yet I love you.
Holy saints!
I love you, my dearest.
Tenfold!
Very. But what can we do? The greater the obstacle to be overcome, the sweeter the reward. Seal that. Kiss me.
Never!
But you love me.
What?
My dear child, I too sometimes think of us and compare you and me with those other lovers of Verona.
I didn't compare.
You and I are Juliet and Romeo. I love you to despair, and I shall brave the wrath of Capulet and Bergman Montague.
Then we love. But how much are this name? Has it happened so soon?
Love is born, we not know how. Because it must be born. I often saw you pass by my window,
I saw you too.
and our eyes spoke in silence.
One day I was gathering nuts in the garden by the lawn.
One day I happened to be reading Shakespeare, to see how everything conspires to unite two hearts.
Warm gust of wind blew my scarf in your direction.
And I climbed to up the wall to return it.
I climbed too.
Since that day, my dear, I have waited here at this hour, by this wall, and each time my heart beat louder and faster, until I knew by your soft voice that you were near.
Now since we love, we must be married.
I was just thinking that.
I, last of the past minutes, do solemnly pledge myself to you, last of the virgins.
What noble recklessness.
We shall be sung in future ages.
Two tender children of two hard-hearted fathers.
But who knows whether the hours are at hand when our father's hatred may end?
I doubt it.
I have heard such stranger things. I can think of half a dozen.
What, for instance?
Imagine that reigning prince comes riding past some day. I run to him and kneel, and tell him the story of our love and our father's hatred. The prince asks to see my father and Bergman, and they are reconciled.
And your father gives me your hand.
Yes, or else, an aged duke, having seen my portrait, falls in love with me, sends a squire to sue for my hand and offers to make me a duchess.
And you say no.
He is offended, and some dark night when I am in the garden meditating, he springs forth out of the darkness. I scream.
Oh, and I lose not a second in springing right over this wall, and I have my dagger in hand,
You
and I
lay low
fight like
3 or 4 men. Then my father rushes in and takes me in his arms. Tell him who you are. His heart softens. He gives me to my Savior. Your father consents, for he is proud of your bravery.
And we live together for years, happy and content.
This is not at all impossible, is it?
Someone's coming.
Kiss me.
This evening at 8. As usual, you will come?
Oh,
Yes.